Hello and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Mike Beitler to the show. Mike has 10 years at IBM in New York, followed by 20 years experience at Texas Instruments in semiconductor and chip building. He recently launched Illum Applied Technologies DLT, which is creating transactive energy exchanges in local energy markets for aggregated demand response with behind-the-meter energy storage. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Raj. Thanks.
Mike, thank you for being on. Mike, I'd like to start things off with something interesting about you that people might not know.
A couple of years ago, I got started cooking, doing a lot of home cooking, and really used that as a way to kind of deleverage stress and stuff. So it's a good outlet and stuff as far as eating healthy, and then also gives you the benefit of, when you serve other people, having them enjoy a meal along with you.
That's really interesting. I'm a big fan of cooking myself. I think it's almost like a vehicle to convey love.
Yep, it's a good communicator. That's one thing everyone has in common. I think we all have to eat food. So and if you get to travel the world or other countries, just seeing how they eat and how they use that as almost like a communication or fellowship mechanism is very interesting.
So are there any particular cuisines that you like?
Oddly enough, like this time of year, a little bit colder outside, Texas chilies and stuff, coming from the Northeast, typically in the Northeast, we use beans in our chili where Texas does not. And then soups and stuff. I love making homemade soups. And it's something that a lot of people generally don't think. I think about making homemade soups, and I think one of the favorite soups I make is a cream-based seafood chowder. Lots of good stuff in there, shrimp, clams, scallops, a lot of good seafood.
Sounds perfect for this time of year.
Yeah, it is.
So Mike, switching gears a little bit, can you share with the audience a little bit about your current endeavor?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I started to see a direction where the energy markets were going, and also where, with all the renewable energy resources we were adding to the grid worldwide and in the United States, that we needed a way to be able to store that power. And in Texas right now, there are about 18,000 wind turbines. So Texas has the largest installed base of wind turbines in the United States. And what I saw in the markets was a lot of times with these renewable energy resources, at night years ago in Texas, they actually would have to stop the windmills because there was not enough power being consumed on the grid. So you can't put more power into the grid than what you use. So pricing in those events would oftentimes go close to zero. And then during the day, they'd go higher. But I saw an opportunity to put batteries in houses or commercial facilities and charge the batteries off peak when prices are cheap, and then take those houses or commercial buildings off the grid and run on stored power during the high pricing events. And where I saw blockchain going or distributed ledger technology going years ago is it gives a very good mechanism to price an asset and put it on a blockchain and stuff in a ledger, and then use offsite databases to tell the battery when to charge and discharge. So what actually happens then is at any existing moment, the people that have these battery storage systems, we can know exactly what price that asset is in that battery and stuff, and look at the market and then use that as an arbitrage mechanism or a demand response mechanism to make that person money.
So that's really interesting, and you and I could probably nerd out on blockchain, but we'll save the audience from doing so. I recently read about some smart energy contracts doing sounds like something similar in Europe. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, there's some power ledgers in Australia. Energy Web Foundation is doing some stuff in Europe. There's a couple in the United States that are doing some stuff. LO3 Energy is doing stuff with solar. They're out of Brooklyn, New York. So there are players looking at the space. And I think right now the biggest thing is getting people to understand the technology better. The blockchain piece for distributed ledger technology, in my view, are enabling technologies where they just allow us to do something greater. And in my case, with the energy storage in the batteries, it will help push battery sales and push these products to the grid edge, so in people's homes. And kind of like Bill Gates said back in, I think, the early 80s, where every home will have a PC, or every home will have a PC on every desk. I really look to the future. I think there will be some form of energy storage in every home, a couple of years down the road.
So I totally agree with you regarding some form of energy storage going down the road. Turning back to blockchain for a minute, I know that there's probably a handful of people that really understand blockchain. And in the last, let's call it year or two, there's been a lull perhaps in the blockchain with people not seeing blockchain products perhaps performing, or, some of the promises that were behind blockchain. What's your experience right now with that whole blockchain space?
I think about a year and a half ago when when Ethereum started, Ethereum came out, and then once Ethereum is out, people started building dApps on Ethereum, and then the whole thing as far as ICOs or initial coin offerings, a lot of people, it's kind of like the dot-com bust back in the around 2000, where everybody wanted an online presence, but as far as how you monetize assets on blockchain and how you actually make it where it's profitable, again, going back to I'm a firm believer in blockchain or distributed ledger technologies are enabling technologies. So they are part of the technology stack. It's not magic pixie dust that you can sprinkle on something and all of a sudden you have a business. There has to be a way to monetize a business beyond blockchain. And, I think there are a lot of people out there that even right now they're having a hard time monetizing how the transactions make money and stuff. And really what it should do is it should simplify the back-end payment process in a lot of things where everything's automated. And that's where Illum Applied Technologies is trying to take it in the energy sector, where we have databases as far as what's the best way to arbitrage a market or make money off the demand response market, and then really use those technologies to make money for the end user, the person. So if we look like a Facebook model where Facebook monetizes all our user data, or even like LinkedIn monetizes user data, Illum Applied Technology is really wanting to give that money back to the people that have the battery storage system. And these will be early adopters that sit there and they see things like climate change or ways where the renewable energy sector need to become more efficient. And really, if these people are, taking risks to put battery storage in their homes, I think they need to benefit from the financial gain that they're helping the system benefit, So I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I agree with you. I like the term as an enabler because I think that when you present it that way, people aren't as focused on it. There are many technologies that we use today, and there are many enabling technologies in the background where people, for example, IoT, most people don't even know how Wi-Fi works or some kind of mesh network, but they use the technology, they use perhaps the products, the hardware at the end of it without even knowing what the back end consists of.
Exactly. So the UI, user interface, or UX, user experience, it really should be based on exactly what you said, Raj, where the people that use this technology should actually not even know it's working in the background. All they should know is, hey, here's the benefit I receive, and actually the experience. I mean, that's where technology becomes very useful. Once the experience becomes seamless, where it's almost like you said, operating in the background, where you don't even know that blockchain is being used or distributed ledger technology is being used. That's where people will start to adapt it and adapt it at high levels, where it's not something like years ago when you have dial-up modems, years ago, and it was a problem connecting to the internet. Once we saw technologies come over and advance where connectivity became much easier, people don't even think about that stuff today, but that's where the technology has to get, where again, it's enabling, or the people don't even know that it's operating in the background.
Right. So what inspired you? Where did you get the idea from?
So working at Texas Instruments, and semiconductor uses a lot of electricity, I started to look at the wholesale energy markets and saw the volatility in the markets. So typically in Texas this past year, wholesale rates have been at $37 a megawatt hour. And during August in Texas, it's very typically hot. And we had a couple peaks in August where the average went from, again, a year average of $37 a megawatt hour up to $9,000 a megawatt hour. And this was not a short spike. Some of these spikes, stayed up there for a couple hours. And this is where the gas peaker plants come online. So they only get paid when they run. So Texas does not have a capacity market, meaning the gas peaker plants only get paid when they actually produce. So really, if we want to start cleaning up the electric grid, it's already happening with coal plants being retired early. But the next would be the gas peaker plants. If we want to see those start to disappear and be removed from the energy mix, really what we need is storage technology. And then the other thing with storage technology is if we go to grid edge, there's a lot of things with congestion fees. So we can look at the energy or the electric grid similar to like toll roads. So when prices go high, a lot of times there are congestion issues on the electric grid, just like when you drive a car on toll roads and there's an accident or something, you pay a higher toll fee on a lot of these roads because the toll access will give you a faster route. So, really, I saw there's a lot of inefficiencies in the electric grid today, and that's where my background in engineering and equipment engineering at two of the biggest semiconductor companies in the world, really looking at a problem and figuring out different ways how to solve that.
And while I appreciate the engineering mindset and the want to solve the inefficiencies, I like to dig a little bit deeper as to why. There's an opportunity cost to doing what you're doing with this entrepreneurial endeavor. You could be doing something else in semiconductors. Using the Simon Sinek example of the why, what's driving you in this particular space?
I think we see inequalities today, in people's incomes and people's ability to save over a lifetime. And I think those inequalities have to start disappearing, the disparities from top 1% earners to the bottom people that, struggle to get by. And really at the end of the day, just like your podcast, Bigger Than Us, I think it does have to become bigger than us where we actually look to the future and more people share the benefit of prosperity. And that prosperity gets distributed more evenly across the playing field. And that's one of the things my wife's background is theology, really looking at things, again, bigger than us, and then using the engineering background that I have to try help propel certain technologies to help people. And I think the energy sector is a spectacular sector to do that because if we look at third world countries that will start to come online as far as with better access to electricity, the first world countries can actually sit there and show other countries how this is done. And there's things in Texas, I think, where Texas is not bound by FERC rules, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission rules. So because Texas electric grid, the ERCOT grid is all in Texas, we do not have to be bound by those rules. And that gives us a great deal of latitude as far as how we can start pushing these technologies to market. So, but bigger than us is really, where we get back to the community and we actually show people how this is going to be built and help people.
Well, my mind's going in a couple of different directions right now. And so I've been speaking to individuals over the past few years. One of my biggest concerns around technology is the disparity around the way people use technology. And what I mean by that is I don't think the majority of individuals, and let me rephrase that, my experience is from interviewing and speaking with individuals, most don't realize how their data is being utilized in technology. They've become consumers of devices. And with those devices, they've been given away, personal information, personal data, which has then been monetized by the larger companies. So that's one direction. The part I really liked, the part you mentioned about, being able to monetize for the people that perhaps are at the lower end of the economic ladder. Everyone uses a utility and power, electricity. And if they could find a way to utilize the utilities they use, I think it would be very, very helpful. There's, again, a lot of conversations around disparity right now, but I think the voices about how to prevent some of that disparity aren't loud enough. And I think this technology could really help, at least not make up for the entire gap by any means, but at least help, lessen the gap.
I think if we look back at history, Tim Berners-Lee, one of the founders of the internet, he really looked back. Well, a couple of years ago, he published a couple papers or was on interviews, and he was kind of frustrated at where the internet ended up. And he always, I think, envisioned it being more decentralized. And one of the things with blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology is we can actually give some of those rights back to the people and stuff that hold some of this technology. So instead of the Facebooks of the world or Apples of the world or Googles of the world, where those powers become very centralized. This gives a prime use case of where once Illum Applied Technologies platform is starting to be deployed, we really start to distribute again that income to the end user, and also use their data where they benefit from it and not the central corporation. And that's really one of the most powerful things about blockchain or distributed ledger technology, is really sharing that wealth and not having that centralized figure in the whole thing.
Yes, I heard the Tim Berners-Lee presentation, I believe, and also a gentleman by the name of Jared Lanier speaks about the same issues around data and
yes,
the opportunity to monetize data going forward, individuals' data going forward. That's
yes,
very, very interesting. And also appreciate the
yep.
fact that, the theology background plays into it. I think we're at a real pivotal point here, perhaps, the end of last decade, the new decade. But I really see that going forward, this decade is going to be a critical decade in our overall evolution, maybe around technology, or just us perhaps realizing some of the changes that perhaps need to be made to level the playing field.
Yes. The social changes, the social and social economic changes that need to happen, again, with the disparity top to bottom, and redistributing that wealth, I think will become more apparent this decade. And, taking small steps to move in that right direction, I think are good. And I actually think it will create a movement where people are more aware of, the data that's being consumed and how it's being used, and, really pull that information back in where, like in a blockchain space where they would own the private keys of their data. And then there's a bunch of different ways to monetize that and stuff but in the energy sector where I'm going again, it's where people use energy every day, and people are looking for solutions. And I don't think there are many very good solutions right now where the end user can actually benefit from the right technologies. And that's really where Illum wants to take it.
And if I'm understanding your technology correctly, it's you don't have to be an active participant, meaning you don't have to actually think about doing it. It just happens for you in the back end. Is that correct?
Yes. We're looking to automate the whole process where you won't even know it's happening. So there's a line item on people's electric bills today called ancillary charges, and one of those things is if we can actually start to provide some ancillary charges where the demand response when people take their house off the grid, people can again benefit very, very highly from doing that. And again, what that allows us to do is push more renewables into the energy mix. So Texas, the next couple of years, has a bunch of solar coming online. That has previously not been to the levels that it will be the next couple of years. And then even with wind turbines, years ago, they used to do what they call curtailment of wind turbines and stop them. And, as we add more of these energy storage, pieces into the grid, those windmills can keep turning at night. And the one thing with the Texas, windscape or landscape, I guess, is typically at night, there's high wind power. So, because the breeze is a lot faster. So, really getting these technologies out there, and it's going to take a lot of people to do this. This isn't, one person or two people doing it. It's employ a lot of people, create a lot of jobs, and actually, really change the planet as far as how we consume energy.
Well, I love the idea or the thought of the automatic savings account in the back end too, where the money's being collected or deposited, and you don't have to think about it.
Yes.
Well, switching gears a little bit, it's apparent that you've done a lot of research in this area. You mentioned wind and solar. What else do you see coming up in the landscape in the next 5 to 10 years that's interesting you?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think, so, if we look back to technology in like phones or computers, how memory prices have dropped. Years ago, you get 4 meg memory and it was super expensive. Well, now we have phones that have, there was a phone I saw the other day had a terabyte of memory on the phone.
Wow.
And so really where I see energy storage going is, as it will not follow Moore's law. Energy storage will not follow Moore's law as far as doubling the computer power and half the price every 2 years. Really, it's going to be a little bit less of a progressive decline, but just in the last decade, as far as what we saw in the price of lithium-ion batteries drop, it's given companies like Tesla the ability right now to market a car that when the Model S came out, it was 120 grand or right around there. And now we have Model 3s at, $35,000 or $40,000. And really in the residential energy storage space, we will see similar price drops in what it costs to adopt this technology. So today, where like a Tesla Powerwall, for example, installed is going to run you somewhere around $11,000 for one unit. Those prices will continue to fall over the next decade, and that's where we'll start to see mass adoption increase much higher. So just as when you buy a new house today and stuff, you have a stove, microwave, dishwasher. In the future, I see every new home you get built will have some sort of energy. Number one, in a battery management system, and then also energy storage. And so I'm really excited to see the prices drop, and then more people adopt this technology.
So my investor hat says start investing in battery technology. And from a labor perspective, I guess this is what we're hearing about with the green jobs. The additional opportunity for new jobs in this sector are for things like battery installation or almost retrofitting homes.
Yes.
Interesting.
There'll be spectacular opportunities to retrofit homes also.
Very interesting. So, Mike, one of the questions I like to ask my guests is, if you could give some advice to the audience, what would it be?
I think one thing is don't be afraid to look at new opportunities outside your existing career path. My background, 30 years in semiconductor, and really to keep learning. Read books and keep learning new things. I think it brings a lot of joy to myself. Learning new things, and it gets exciting. 30 years in one field. It brings some excitement into life. It gives you something different to do. And although I do feel semiconductors will be around for I can see the foreseeable future, I think this is a big opportunity to go on something different. So I guess my advice would be keep learning and stay excited. And look at different opportunities and people of diverse backgrounds. The one thing with diversity is everyone brings something different to the table. They view stuff through a different lens. And getting a diverse group of people in a room where maybe someone's not in the energy industry, but they may have see a different solution to a problem that other people cannot see, and have the ability to respect people and view that diversity as part of the solution becomes very, very powerful.
Mike, I love the idea of learning and diversity. And since you mentioned books are very near and dear to my heart. In fact, I tell people that I think my Amazon book bill is probably my most expensive bill every month. Any good books you recommend that you read recently, on topic or off topic, doesn't matter?
Yeah, there was a book I read a couple months ago. It was on late bloomers, and it's written by Richard. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce his last name right, Karlsgaard. And I have two kids, and my son, he's probably going to end up being a little bit of a late bloomer. That was actually looking at people that today, how we press children to be exceptional very early and stuff. And there are people in life where, especially for men, where their brain function does not really start to hit the high points until sometimes mid 20s to late 20s and stuff. So that was one of the good books I read. And then there was another book called The Starfish and the Spider, and that talks about leaderless organizations. So one of the things with the digital ledger technology that Illum Applied Technologies is using is Hedera Hashgraph. And Hedera Hashgraph was actually they're governing the way they govern their blockchain or distributed ledger technology was based off a leaderless organization. So Mance Harmon, the CEO of Hedera, actually got that from some of those concepts from Dee Hock. So Dee Hock was the founder of Visa years ago. And so there's some interesting books out there also on him, but a lot of good stuff on leaderless organizations. And again, it goes back to a little bit earlier in the podcast where I kind of mentioned how decentralization, taking all that top wealth from the C office and corporations and giving it to more uniformly across an organization.
Well, I'd be remiss to add that Hedera is a local Dallas company, so just want to add that in there.
Yep. Yep. Great company.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time today in the conversation, and I look forward to seeing where Illum goes. Any last words?
Okay. Yeah, I think, let's catch up in a couple months, and, I'd like to share some updates with you. And, I think, I'm looking forward to the future.
Appreciate that, Mike. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Raj.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.